Okay, so I guess we're going to talk about this couple of topics tonight, rebirth and karma. Two of the most interesting topics in Buddhism, not only in Buddhism but in all religions, whether there's rebirth, whether there's karma. So tonight we're going to talk about these two topics, rebirth and karma. So the first, I'm going to talk about rebirth. So I'm not going to just talk about the Buddhist concept of rebirth, because it will give, I think, all of us or all of you all a pretty narrow view, like we just talked about what is rebirth in Buddhism. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go through various other concepts, actually just go one big round and then come back to rebirth in Buddhism. So generally rebirth, actually there's this, what people are always thinking, whether there's really rebirth or not. So rebirth, people think, is there one life or are there many lives? I'm sure you know some religions, they tell you, oh, it's just this one life after you die, and then, either that's it or you go to a place forever and ever. Or some of the other religions, they also say many lives. So which is which? Can we determine whether it's one life or many lives? Is there rebirth or is there not rebirth? Okay, to answer this question, we are going to go all the way back, all the way out to the universe. This picture, I think, from the Hubble telescope, all the galaxies, the stars and all that. So anybody know where is the Earth here? Okay, this brother is very smart. Our planet is, of course, our solar system is, of course, nowhere in this slide because we're taken from exactly what you said, from a point outside this picture. So we're going to go all the way back to the universe to see whether we can get some clues on rebirth or not. Okay, regarding the universe, there's different concepts. There's one concept called the linear concept of the universe. Another concept is called the cyclical concept of the universe. Okay, what do these mean? In the linear concept, there's basically just eternity. Eternity, the starting point, and then eternity, the ending point. So, from the beginnings of time, from eternity all the way back, suddenly somebody or something or some God or some force creates the universe. So we have creation. Then from creation, there's existence. And then the universe exists for a long time. And then finally it comes to an end. Either this God or this force comes and destroys the universe, it comes to an end. And then after that again, there's eternity. So from eternity, there's the universe in existence, then the universe comes to an end, and then after that, eternity again. So this relates to the linear concept of existence. So there's eternity again, and then there's birth. That means from out of nowhere, we come into existence. Either God created us or, well, we just come into existence. So this is birth. We live our life. Whatever is our lifespan, now is about 60, 70, 80, if we're lucky enough to live that long. For me, I'm quite happy to live until 70. After that, we can retire already. So, okay, not everybody gets to live so long. Some people, they live shorter lives. But the fact is that from eternity, there's birth, there's a life, and then finally, there's death. So the point is that death leads to either one of two things in this linear concept of existence. It can lead either to the end of existence. This is called nihilism. This is what the atheists believe in. In other words, after we die, there's nothing. There's no more existence. We just go out of existence. The other idea, or the other belief, is the belief in eternal life. This is eternalism. So as you can see, these are two extremes. One is the end of existence after death. The other is eternal life after death. So we call basically nihilism and eternalism. These are the two extreme views. So eternalism means after your life, depending on what you believe in, depending on which religion you adhere to, they teach you different things. But what it says is, after life is either heaven or hell. That means after this life, if you're good or if you believe in that particular deity or if you believe in that particular religion, you spend the rest of eternity enjoying yourself in heaven. If not, then you spend the rest of eternity burning in hell. I just come up with this picture. I thought it's quite nice. All these people dancing, and then the other people all burning in hell, suffering. So the idea is that in the concept of eternal life, this is what happens. After this life, eternity, either in heaven or hell. Okay, we just seen the linear concept. So the other concept is the cyclical concept of the universe. So this means that the universe arises, it comes into existence, then it dissolves, and after that it arises again, it comes into existence, it dissolves. So this is cyclical. It goes on and on and on. It's not just from one point to the other. It's not from point A to point B, but it's cyclical. So this leads to the cyclical theory of the universe. These are some scientific theories. One of the theories nowadays is that there's a Big Bang. Then after the Big Bang, the universe expands, and after aeons it contracts. Then it contracts, and it comes to the Big Crunch. Then the Big Crunch, then after that, there's a Big Bang, then expands, contracts, and then the Big Crunch. So this is what actually Buddhists believe in. Like the Dalai Lama, he was asked in the scientific forum, what does he think of the Big Bang? So the Dalai Lama replied, which Big Bang? Do you mean this one, or the infinite Big Bangs previously, or the Big Bangs after this Big Bang? So obviously in Buddhism, we adhere to this cyclical theory of the universe. That means the universe comes into existence, it expands, and it contracts, and it comes together again, then there's a Big Crunch. So the thing is that in the linear concept, this is a very simple concept. It's from point A to point B. It starts from point A, it ends at point B. This is a more sophisticated concept. That means this is a circle. Basically what this is saying is that in the beginning and the end are all connected. Like this circle, well actually it's an oval shape. So let's imagine it's a circle. So in this circle, there's no beginning, there's no end, right? You can put your starting point at any point on the circle, and you can take that as either the beginning or the ending. So this is what we mean by the cyclical theory of the universe. It goes on and on and on without beginning and without ending. So one of the questions asked is that, okay, the universe must have come into existence at some point in time. Somebody must have created it. Something must have created it. In some of the religions, they teach you there must be some force, some god or some deity that creates the universe. How can the universe come into existence? Correct or not? So, but the thing is that you can ask, if the universe has to come into existence due to being created by a god or a deity, then how about that deity? That deity must have come into existence by having been created from something else, right? This goes back on and on. So if the universe has to be created by a deity, then why not you just believe that the universe has been in existence all along? If you believe that this god or deity has been in existence all along, and then somehow or other comes and creates the universe, isn't it more logical that the universe has been in existence all the time instead? So this is what we mean by this circle, this cyclical concept. There's no beginning and there's no ending. So right now, even the scientists also are looking at this theory. So this is a recent report, July 2007, by some in some scientific magazine. So it says that the universe has been in existence for about 14 billion years, came into existence from a Big Bang, and it has been expanding, cooling, and evolving since then. But recently, there's a small but growing number of theoreticians, scientists, that have begun to challenge this conventional view. And then there are this so-called radical new history or radical new theory of the universe. So according to this so-called new idea, there was a Big Bang. But this Big Bang is not the beginning of time and space. In fact, in this version proposed by this scientist who wrote this article, this so-called Big Bang has occurred myriad or countless of times in the universe past, which repeats at regular intervals, during which the galaxies, stars, planets and life form anew. So like I said, the result this theory is a cyclical universe in which cycles extend far into the past and into the future, perhaps forever. So, isn't this what the Buddhists believe in? Then they say it's a radical new theory, it's a new theory. But this is what has been believed by the Buddhists all along. So, this leads to the cyclical concept of existence. We've seen how the universe goes in cycles. Following from that, in Buddhism we also believe that existence is also cyclical in nature. In other words, again, we are born. We live our life. Eventually we die. Then after death, we are reborn again. Birth comes again. Then birth, life, death, so on and so forth. So we'll explore this concept more in the next lesson when we go into dependent origination, Paticca Samuppada. We'll go into this more detail. The next lesson is really quite interesting to see what the Buddhist teachings are on dependent origination. One of the most profound teachings, but extremely interesting, and you can learn a lot from just that teaching of dependent origination next week. So this is basically the cyclical concept of existence. Birth, life, death, birth, life, death. So you can see in nature, most things are cyclical. Even the 4 seasons, well, we don't have 4 seasons here. Like you're in Europe or in the US or in a temperate country, it's always cyclical. You have winter, spring, summer, fall, winter, spring, summer, fall. It goes on and on. Even stock market, who trade shares? I'm sure some of you invest in shares, right? So share market is also not all the way up, not all the way down. It's sometimes up, sometimes down. So this is also the stock market cycles. So most things in nature are cyclical. It's not just point A, point B and then finish. So some of the early beliefs also adhere to this cyclical concept of existence. In other words, reincarnation or rebirth. I will explain these terms in more detail a while later. What is the difference between reincarnation and rebirth? Okay, in Brahmanism, Hinduism, according to Hinduism, the soul, the Atman, is immortal. So while the body is subject to birth and death, the Bhagavad Gita is one of the holy books of Brahmanism. It states that the body is like our clothes. It's like worn out garments. That means every time our soul or Atman is reborn, it just puts on a new set of clothes. This is basically what it's saying. Worn out garments are shed by the body. Worn out bodies are shed by the dweller within the body. So new bodies are donned by the dweller like garments, like clothes. Like every time we put in a new set of clothes. Even Taoism, the Chuang-Tzu, I believe this is one of the books in Taoism. It also states, birth is not a beginning. Death is not an end. So there's existence without limitation. There's continuity without a starting point. Which is what I said just now about a circle, right? You can just pinpoint any point of the circle and you can take that as a starting point or as an ending point. Any point of the circle can be taken as a starting point or an ending point. So, even Taoism believes there's continuity without a starting point. Existence without limitation is space. Continuity without a starting point is time. So continuity does not necessarily need to have a starting point, point A to point B. It can go on and on like in a circle. So there's birth, there's death, there's issuing forth, there is entering in. This just simply means that there is reincarnation or rebirth. The Greek philosophers also believe in rebirth or in past lives. There's this famous philosopher Pythagoras. He claimed he could remember his past lives. Socrates, I'm sure you know, he took poison to kill himself. One of the great Greek philosophers. He says he is confident that there's such a thing as living again, and that the living spring from the dead. Plato also presents detailed accounts of reincarnation in his major works. Even in Christianity, there are some evidence that the early Christians, they did believe in some form of reincarnation. But of course, nowadays Christians reject reincarnation because it is simply against the theory of their basic beliefs. Because if there's reincarnation, then there's no need for Jesus Christ. So mainstream Christianity rejects reincarnation. But based on certain of the early texts and some of the early church fathers, the early Christians did have some beliefs in reincarnation, but these proofs were later destroyed because, like I said, it's against their major teachings, against their major concepts. So in the 3rd century, this church father called Origen had been an adherent of reincarnation. He believed that the soul existed before birth. So according to him, he said the soul has neither beginning nor end. They come into this world strengthened by their victories or weakened by the defeats of their previous lives. So many spiritualists that believe in reincarnation, not necessarily Buddhism or Hinduism or Taoism, that they do believe, even many of these Western spiritualists, they believe in reincarnation. That means they believe that we are put on this world to learn certain lessons, learn how to be rich, how to be poor, how it is to be healthy, how it is to be sick. And then, depending on how you perform in this life, then you go on to the next life. So in this life, for example, if you're rich, then you misuse your wealth, then in the next life, then you'll be born poor to experience how it is like on the other side of the coin. It's a bit like karma, but not actually. There's a bit of difference. So this is some of the spiritual beliefs even in modern times. So we've seen some of the early concepts. Now let's look a bit into the scientific evidence. Anybody here heard of this Professor Ian Stevenson? Sister here has heard of him, right? Quite a famous guy who has done a tremendous amount of research in reincarnation into past lives. Well, he's an American. He's passed away a few years ago. Anyway, he's a former head of the Division of Perceptual Studies at the University of Virginia in the USA. So he devoted 40 years of his life to collect scientific documentation of the past life memories of children from all over the world. So he alone accumulated more than 3,000 cases in his files about reincarnation. So this is totally nothing to do with religion, totally nothing to do with spiritualism. They just simply want to do research into whether there is reincarnation, into whether there are past lives or not. Another researcher is this Dr. Jim Tucker. He's a medical director of the Child and Family Psychiatric Clinic at the University of Virginia. So he wrote a book. In fact, he wrote several books. One of his most well-known books is called Life Before Life. This presents accounts of young children who have had verifiable accounts of past life experiences, and is based on more than 2,500 cases. And these cases are registered in the files of the university. So what happens is that they go and interview all these children, and then to get the evidence whether or not they can remember their past lives. So evidently, they've come up with so much evidence for past lives, for reincarnation, for rebirth. Another well-known one is Carol Bowman. Actually, you can look these books up in the internet, and they're available. Some of these books are available in our bookstores. You can go to Kinokuniya. You can read books by these authors. So this Carol Bowman, she's a lecturer, author, counselor. She does past life regression and is a pioneer in reincarnation studies. What some of these therapists do is that people have psychological problems. So they do this hypnotic regression to go back to their early childhood. So they try to root out what are the reasons for their psychological problems in this life. But apparently in certain cases, they found out that they regress, and suddenly they jump back into the past life. So some of these people are quite puzzled, you see. How come these people, under hypnotic regression, they can go back to their early childhood, and not only that, they can jump back to their past lives. So this is further evidence that there is rebirth, that these children or these people can remember their past lives. And one thing, some of this research is very consistent. So like for example, she wrote two of her first books, Children's Past Lives and Return from Heaven. And these are classics in this reincarnation field, and they've been published and read around the world in 16 different languages. So some of these people have actually set up to do this research to debunk reincarnation. That means some they do not believe in reincarnation or not, but they go and do research to disprove reincarnation. But what happens is that during the course of their research, they have found so much evidence that they are forced to believe that there really is reincarnation. So they have to let go of their previous beliefs that there is no reincarnation. And in fact, from trying to debunk reincarnation or rebirth or past lives, now they are forced to believe and show that there is evidence that there are past lives. Another professor is Dr. Brian Weiss. chairman of the Department of Psychiatry at the Mount Sinai Medical Center in Miami. He's one of the first doctors to explore the past lives of his patients as a means of therapy. So he has numerous case histories to illustrate the healing potential of past life regression therapy, and he provides several techniques for eliciting past life recall. So what these people are doing is actually to cure patients who have psychological problems. So some of the problems cannot be cured when they regress even to their early childhood. That means they cannot trace the root of their problems even though they go to the early childhood. Then some they jump back to the previous life, the past life. And then from then on they can detect in some cases what happened during the past life that lead to psychological problems in this present life. So you can see there's a whole body of scientific research and evidence for past lives. Okay, some quotations on rebirth by some famous philosophers. One is Albert Schweitzer. So he also believes in reincarnation. So what does he say? He says reincarnation contains a most comforting explanation of reality by which Indian thought surmounts difficulties which baffle the thinkers of Europe. Because if you just stick to one life, that may lead to many philosophical problems. For example, why just one life? Why not many lives? For the people who believe in only one life, this is a question which is often asked. Why am I based just on this one life? Just because of what I do in this one life, and after that I have to go spend eternity in either heaven or hell. Why this life only? Let's say we live 70 years. Depending on this 70 years, it determines the rest of eternity. It's a difficult concept to swallow, right? Why not many lives to determine what happens to us after eternity? Why just this one life? And then also this one life, why have so different conditions? Like a person is born into a wealthy family, a person born into a poor family, a person born healthy, a person born handicapped. And then after this life, then determines his existence in eternity. This creates difficulties, but how are you going to justify this? So that's why this Albert Schweitzer says that rebirth, past lives, reincarnation surmounts these difficulties in thought. Because if you say that there's rebirth, there's past lives, so this means at least that you have a chance to come back to experience many different lives and then go on to eternity, whether in rebirth or whatever the case may be. Another writer, Jack London, he said, I did not begin when I was born, nor when I was conceived. He said, I did not begin when I was born, nor when I was conceived. So he's just simply saying that he has existed before his birth. So he has been growing, developing through incalculable myriads of millenniums. All my previous selves have their voices, echoes, promptings in me. Incalculable times again shall I be reborn. So this is precisely what Buddhism believes in. We didn't just start with this life, we have uncountable lives previously, and we will have many, many lives after this life. Another philosopher, German philosopher, so he's quite critical of this idea of just one life. So what he says is that if somebody from Asia were to ask his definition of Europe, he would be forced to say that Europe is the part of the world suffering the delusion that man was created out of nothing and that his present birth is his first entrance in life. So he says it's a delusion that we are just coming into this life out from nowhere, which is what I said just now, right? According to the linear concept, point A to point B, we are born and then that's it. I mean, we don't have any previous lives. So he says that no, it cannot be. He doesn't believe that this birth is the first time that he has come into existence. Another person, Henry Ford, he believes in reincarnation. He adopted the theory of reincarnation when he was 26. So he believes that genius is experience. Something that this is a gift or a talent, but Henry Ford says this is the fruit of long experience in many lives. This is very, very similar to what Buddhists believe in. So it's not that genius, you come into this life and then suddenly you become a genius. Buddhism also believes that some of our experience or memories are brought into this life. That's why some people are born with talent. Like you see some of these child prodigies, for example. Within a few years, Mozart, he can compose so many symphonies. So this is possibly brought over from a previous life. And this is exactly what Henry Ford is saying. So you know who Henry Ford is, right? He's the first person to mass produce automobiles for the public, to make it affordable. So this is the first mass produced automobile, am I correct? The Model T. Now we see Henry Ford believes in past lives. This is his grandson, William Ford Jr., the actual grandson of Henry Ford. So he's the chairman of the Ford Motor Company, the actual chairman now, board of directors. You can check it up in the Ford website. So he brings Buddhist philosophies, environmental concerns and aspirations to his Ford Motor Company. Can you believe it? The actual Ford Motor Company. He's been vegetarian for 10 years, embraces martial arts, acupuncture, yoga, as well as Zen, Tibetan and Vipassana Buddhism. So he's a believer. He's one of the more famous Buddhists in America. So the chairman of Ford Motor Company is a Buddhist. Quite amazing, right? Who have iPhone? So what's the connection between iPhone and Buddhism? Steve Jobs, the inventor of the iPhone, the Mac, is apparently a Buddhist. There's some articles, Steve Jobs is a vegan, vegetarian, but there's a difference between being a vegan and a vegetarian. Vegetarian, usually they still take some animal products such as eggs and milk. Vegan, totally no animal products. They totally eat only plant products, no animal products at all. I believe I read somewhere that Steve Jobs got married quite recently, within the past couple of years, according to Zen rituals. So he got married in a Buddhist ceremony. What this article says is that he receives only $1 as his annual salary at Apple. So little is known of Jobs' private life, besides the fact that he practices Buddhism and eats vegan food. Quite interesting, right? So you'd be surprised, in America it's quite interesting. Like sometimes in the Asian countries, right, Buddhism is seen as for the lesser educated, which of course is changing nowadays with more books, more teachings in English. But in America it's not, In America, some of these Western countries, Buddhism is seen as a more intellectual religion. Another one, Harrison Ford. I'm sure you know him, right? Star of Indiana Jones, star of Star Wars. Who watched Star Wars in 1978? I was 18 years old then. I watched the first Star Wars 3 times. Anyway, Harrison Ford is also a Buddhist. Another Buddhist, Richard Gere, very active, supporting the Dalai Lama in Tibet. So he's very close to the Dalai Lama. Another movie star, Keanu Reeves, star of Matrix, and a lot of other action shows. So seemingly he also practices Buddhism. Quite a few others. This Norton antivirus, all these Norton tools. The founder, Peter Norton, used to be a Buddhist monk. Interesting, right? So we come back to the concept of rebirth in Buddhism now. So in Buddhism, rebirth, the Buddha taught that the consciousness of the person upon death is one of the contributing causes for the arising of a new person. In other words, the consciousness arising in a new person is neither identical to nor entirely different from the old consciousness, but it forms a part of the causal continuum or stream with it. That means our consciousness from our past life. Consciousness in Buddhism is a stream. So when our past life comes to an end, the consciousness goes on. So the stream doesn't come to an end with the death of our previous body. That means the body will die off, but because of craving and attachment, because of our karma, our consciousness will seek rebirth into the new life. So what's the difference, reincarnation and rebirth? This is quite crucial because most religions, even though they believe in past lives, they believe in reincarnation. For example, Hinduism. Hinduism believes that there's a permanent entity, an Atman, as I mentioned just now, an eternal soul that survives the body after death and reincarnates into another body. According to Buddhism, rebirth is simply just the stream of consciousness arising in the new being, taking with it only its karmic potential. So there's a great difference between these two concepts. So if it's reincarnation, that means after I die, me, Brother Lee, will be reborn into another body. That means it'll be brotherly again, all over again. But as we showed last week when we went through this example about anatta, it's not possible because we are changing all the time. Your body is changing, your mind is changing, your memories are changing, your perceptions are changing, your feelings are changing, everything is changing. So how can I, even though if I want to believe that I, brotherly, will be reborn into a next life, it's not possible because even in this present life, I'm changing all the time. Like I demonstrated last week, even from minute to minute, I'm standing here. Within even these few minutes, I'm changing. So how can I be reincarnated into a next life as brotherly when even within the time I'm standing here, I keep changing? So it's only the consciousness which arises in the new being after death which is reborn. That means after this life, my consciousness will seek a new body. Again, I will cover this a bit more in detail in the next lesson when we do dependent origination. So we take a step back. We are composed of no more than the 5 aggregates or khandas. Khandas is a Pali term for heaps. That means we are composed of only these 5 things. Composed of our form, our body, in Pali is called rupa, our consciousness called vijnana, our feelings called vedana, our perceptions called sanya, our mental states called sankhara. So let me just go through this again. Form is our body. If you go deeper into it, we are composed of 4 elements, but I'm not going to go into that right now. So form is our body. So it's nama and rupa. Nama is our mind, rupa is our body. So we break it up into 2, it's just nama and rupa. Mind and body. So rupa is our body. Our mind is composed of these 4 things. Our consciousness, like I said, our consciousness will go on to the next life after this life. So consciousness arises all the time, except when we are in a very deep sleep. Like now, you're conscious, right? All of you are conscious, right? So your consciousness now is arising primarily at the eye. Your eye consciousness arises. Then you hear me, your ear consciousness arises. Then when you're sitting down, feeling the chair, your body consciousness arises. Then occasionally your smell consciousness, your tongue consciousness will arise, but not so much now like this environment. Then when you're sitting here, maybe you're thinking of your family back home, you're thinking what you're going to eat for supper, you're thinking about tomorrow, there's your mind consciousness arises. So that's our consciousness, one of the 5 aggregates. The next is feelings. Feelings, you have feelings all the time. It can be positive, negative, neutral. You like something, you don't like something. Then perceptions or memory, how you perceive things, how you see things. Like for example, you never met this person before. So before you met him, you don't have a perception of this person. But after you met him, maybe you can click with him, or maybe you can't stand the sight of him. So you have a perception, you have a memory of this person. So perception arises. And perception again always changes. When this person, one day you get along with him, next day you don't like him, or whatever the case may be. So perception always changes. Mental states also always change. Your moods change. Sometimes angry, sometimes happy. Sometimes you feel generous, you make some donations. Sometimes you feel very stingy, you don't even want to donate 10 cents to those people who come along with those donation boxes. So all these are changing. Which one of these doesn't change? No one can say all this doesn't change, right? Even the body, as I stand here, consciousness changes. Your feelings change, your perception change, your mental states change. So which of this does not change? This is what a human being is composed of, and this always changes. So how can there be a reincarnation? Because reincarnation states that this will be reborn into another person after death. But as I've shown now, all these changes. So reincarnation is hard to defend. I will go into this concept of reincarnation later when we talk about the human needs, the psychological need for the belief in the self, to the belief in the ego. Why do people need so much to believe in the ego, to believe that we have an eternal self or eternal soul? So because the 5 aggregates are in a continuous state of flux, it's always changing, there cannot be an eternal soul or eternal self. So we are changing every second, not to say every year, or not to say every 10 years, or not to say even to the next life. So we are changing every second, physically and mentally. So when we go to the next life, it's a bit like the candle. This is a common simile. That means from this life you light the candle, another candle, that's the next life. So it's neither the same nor different from the original flame. So as I mentioned last week, there's conventional and ultimate reality. In conventional reality, we are the same. In ultimate reality, we are always changing. That's what I mean when it says neither the same nor totally different. So a person in his 40s is not entirely the same nor entirely different when he was as a child, right? In conventional reality, he's the same person. But in ultimate reality, he's a different person. Right? Same when he becomes an old man. He's different. Right? I mean, you cannot say that a 5-year-old child is the same as a 70-year-old man, right? Even though the child lives to be an old man when he's 70. What in the 70-year-old man is the same as a child when he was 5 years old? The only thing that remains constant is his name. Right? Everything internal has changed. The only thing that has remained constant for a person when he was 5 and a person when he's 70 is external factors. His name remains the same. His family remains the same. So it's the external factors that remain the same. But everything within that child, when he reaches 70, has changed. So do you see what I mean? That it's not entirely the same nor entirely different when he was a child and when he becomes an old man. So this is what we mean by anatta. There's nothing which is permanent in ourselves. Everything changes. There's no permanent self. That's why anatta means insubstantiality. There's nothing substantial about us. There's nothing fixed. That's why we are always changing. That's why the Buddha found out this thing called anatta, non-self, insubstantiality. So in the rebirth, the new being is not entirely the same nor entirely different from the previous being, because he brings the consciousness over, he brings the karma over. So what are the causes of rebirth? The causes of rebirth can be either greed, hatred and delusion. That's one way of looking at it. Or craving and clinging and ignorance or delusion. In Theravada, technically the causes of rebirth is craving and delusion. In Mahayana, for example, they say greed, hatred and delusion, but it's actually the same thing because craving is you want something. Opposite side of the coin is aversion. So you like something, you don't like something. There's always craving, hatred. You cling to something, you are averse to something. So the causes of rebirth are craving and clinging, ignorance and delusion. This is what we'll cover in the next lesson, dependent origination. So the process of rebirth, what are the factors that are necessary? What are the conditions necessary for rebirth to take place? Conception. There has to be the union of the mother and father. The father to provide the sperm, the mother to provide the egg. It must be the mother's proper season. Of course, if the mother isn't fertile, then no matter what the father does, conception will not take place. And then finally, in Buddhism, there must be a stream of consciousness of the deceased person that is ready to take rebirth into the new body. That's why sometimes this may explain like stillborn babies, infants which they do not develop within their mother's womb. These stillborn infants. That means it's a possibility that there is no consciousness that has entered into the fetus, into the mother's womb. Because in Buddhism, if you study Abhidharma, the consciousness must enter the fetus for the physical body to develop. If the consciousness does not enter, then it will not properly develop, then likelihood you will be stillborn. So that's one explanation of why some babies are stillborn. I'm not saying it is the explanation, or I'm not saying it is the only explanation. I'm just saying that it is a possible explanation for stillborn babies. There's no consciousness coming into the fetus. So these are the conditions necessary for rebirth to take place. So what are the factors in rebirth? There's a next destination from our past life. This is our destination. We come into this human realm in these current conditions, male, female in Singapore, in this body. So we must also see what is our next destination and the conditions of our next existence. And these are determined by our karma. So the factors of rebirth, our next destination, and the conditions of our next existence are determined by karma. And we cover karma in the second session. Okay, usually a lot of questions right now. Any questions?
But how the conception is stillborn and not completed from should it be at the point
Okay. Okay. So you're asking is that if the fetus already has come into existence, then is it because if it's stillborn, is it because the consciousness has not come into the fetus? Okay, so you're saying how come the fetus can be stillborn? Right? Yeah, correct. The fetus may be growing. I agree with you. That's why I'm saying the consciousness not entering the fetus is a possible explanation. It is not the only explanation. There may be other factors. I mean, it may be just simply that the consciousness has gone into the fetus, but then because of some external factors, maybe because the mother is not healthy enough, maybe she's taken something, for example, maybe something to abort. Maybe she got sick, then the fetus does not develop. So that's also a possible explanation. Sometimes some mothers are just simply not healthy enough, or maybe there's an accident. These things are unfortunate. So we cannot just always explain it that the consciousness has not come into the fetus. Sometimes it may have come, like you said, sometimes it's an abortion. And that's why in Buddhism is against abortion, because you are simply put killing a newborn being. Of course, there may be other external factors also. For example, the fetus may be life-threatening to the mother. In that case, you have to see the situation. Maybe the fetus will come out extremely deformed. Then again, you have to see the situation. But if you just abort the baby, strictly speaking in Buddhism terms, that is killing. Because even though the fetus or even though the baby come out may be subnormal, maybe there's a karma of the being, maybe there's a karma of the parents to have this child to take care of, who knows. And then also not necessarily that the person born out deformed cannot lead a productive life. I'll show you in the next lesson, Pachisamuppada, that there are people who have physical disabilities but contribute a tremendous amount to society. So you cannot say, like for example, some of you may know Brother Sun Han. Sun Han is healthy, fit, ordinary, but his elder brother is wheelchair bound. There's this genetic condition. These people don't grow up. They remain like dwarfs like that now. So he can't move properly. He's wheelchair bound. So he's stuck like that. He's deformed, right? So if his mother could have aborted him, but he's not useless, no? He contributes a lot to society. I think last year only, he led this event to raise funds for charity, to raise funds for awareness. And then he goes into this wheelchair with all these other people throughout this area. I was there, I went for the event. Not necessarily that they are useless. They're in fact better than a lot of other people who go and commit crimes, who steal, or like all these lawyers. Highly educated, professional, leading a good life. At the end of the day, what happens? They steal 10 million, run away, and then everybody get into trouble. So not necessarily you are healthy means you are good. Not necessarily you are deformed means you are no good. So what I'm trying to say is that, or if a mother or parents abort the baby just because of deformity, that is killing. Because sometimes you may have to let this person come into this life to fulfill certain karma. Maybe they also have to fulfill certain karma. So a fetus being stillborn, not necessarily is just because the consciousness does not enter the fetus. It may be because of other factors. I hope I answered your question. Any more questions?
But sometimes environment also plays a part. If the mother is unable to look after the deformed child, or this is got to somebody for the take of the burden. So in that case, so sometimes medically, sometimes they weigh up the cost and they decide on abortion.
So let me just repeat what brother here says. He says in certain cases the mother may simply be incapable of taking care of a deformed or an abnormal baby. So some mothers or some families, I agree with you, they may not have the means to take care of a subnormal child, and then they take the decision to abort. That is their decision. But not necessarily there's no karma, because they do it consciously. Whatever is their reason, they destroy the fetus, they destroy the child, whether it's deformed or not, there will be the karma. So even though they may have reasons, they will still have to bear the karma. There's no question about it. So, like karma, I will talk about karma later, is that you don't believe or what, you are still being affected by it. So these people, they may abort, no choice. I agree with you. They may not have the means, they may not have the capabilities to take care of these abnormal infants. They abort the baby. Well, there's nothing we can say. I mean, we can't tell them not to abort. This is their life. So at Buddhism, well, the most we can do is just advise them, even if we know them. But if they choose to, they choose to. This is their life, this is their karma. We cannot say, oh, you cannot abort, you cannot do this, you cannot do that. That is not Buddhism. The most is you can just advise them. That's about it. Then the karma is theirs to bear.